I'm honored to be here today to introduce our special guest, Omar Ishrak, Chairman, Chief Executive Officer of Medtronic, the 30th anniversary premier partner of Life Science Alley. Mr. Ishrak has served as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Medtronic since June of 2011. As you all know, Medtronic is the world's leading medical technology company with more than $17 billion in annual revenues and operations reaching more than 140 countries worldwide. Medtronic provides therapies that are used to treat a wide range of conditions, including cardiac, vascular disease, diabetes, neurological and spinal conditions, and many other services that, again, enable access to the wonderful products that they provide. The Medtronic mission is to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life for millions of people around the world. Omar joined Medtronic from General Electric Company, where he spent 16 years, most recently as President and Chief Executive Officer of GE Healthcare Systems, a $12 billion division of GE Healthcare, with a broad portfolio of diagnostics, imaging, patient monitoring, and life support systems. Omar also served as an officer and as a Senior Vice President of General Electric. Earlier in his career, Omar amassed 13 years of technology development and business management experience, holding leadership positions at Diagnostics of VigMed and various product development and engineering positions at Philips Ultrasound. He grew up in Bangladesh, earned a Bachelor of Science degree and PhD in electrical engineering from the University of London, King's College. Omar is a member of the Board of Trustees of the Asia Society and also on the Health Leadership Council of the Save the Children Foundation. Joining Omar on the stage for an interview will be Life Science Alley President and CEO, Shay Mandel. Please join me in welcoming Omar Ishrak to the stage.
Well, first, thank you for those very kind words and very nice introduction. Thank you.
Well, we've been, at Life Science Alley, we've certainly been waiting for this day for a long time, and it is an incredible honor to have you here today. So Omar, to get started, so things have been just actually pretty quiet at Medtronic these days, haven't they?
Which planet have you been in?
Well, we thought we'd kind of get things rolling. Obviously, your company is the talk of the town, the moves that you've been making, and so there are a lot of different things we could talk about today. Sure. So I'll just start taking us through, I think, some things that are really important to you, but I'd love for you to take this wherever you'd like to go. For those of you out there, we didn't plan this ahead of time. We haven't scripted this out and sat down. So I think there's some big topical areas, and hopefully we'll have enough time again to engage all of you. So clearly our world's changing, healthcare's changing, Medtronic's changing. One of the big objectives about healthcare changes today is how do we deliver value-based healthcare? What does it mean to lower costs but also improve outcomes? And Medtronic is playing a leadership role in this. How do we accomplish value-based healthcare?
Well, a number of things. First of all, a little background on Medtronic, which I'm sure most of you know fairly well. But as was mentioned a little while ago, the mission of Medtronic, which has been rooted in our history for the last 50 years, is really using technology, using biomedical engineering, to alleviate pain, restore health, or extend life. And those are nice words and very inspirational words. But in those words is a very significant strategic element. If you think about it, what those words convey is that Medtronic is really about using technology to change outcomes. And in the start of Medtronic, that has always been a focus. As many of you may well have heard of, Medtronic, the founder of Medtronic, Earl Bakken, invented the pacemaker and created a market and a whole technology and a therapy around that, which eventually moved to broader and broader areas of cardiac disease and other such areas. But all along, focusing on changing outcomes has been a core philosophy of Medtronic. Now, for the first, let's say, 40 years, till the mid-2000s or so, what that meant was Medtronic prioritized a very close relationship with physicians, with physician collaborators, so that Medtronic understood at the bedside what was required to invent technology that changed patient outcomes. Equally, Medtronic understood very clearly the importance of clinical evidence, of conducting peer-reviewed trials which could have peer-reviewed articles around them that could eventually lead to reimbursement and eventually market creation. And that was our bread and butter, and I think most people objectively will acknowledge that we're one of the leaders in market creation and in medical devices as a company. Now, what happened, and then that worked for Medtronic, and Medtronic in many ways developed some great capabilities, excellent credibility, and a reputation through that, and success, financial success, and in the end, fulfill its mission. However, I'd say about 10 years ago, so 5 to 10 years ago, it started to get a little more difficult to achieve the results that we were used to achieving. And that was because just generating clinical evidence was not sufficient. The stakeholders in healthcare, the reimbursement agencies, the hospitals, even the regulatory agencies decided that, correctly, decided that not only do we need clinical evidence, but we need to understand economic evidence as well, as related to that clinical evidence. Now, while that was understood philosophically, no one really knew how to do that. And so what happened was people simply said that we won't pay for anything, or we'll reduce the amount of reimbursement, or we'll just make things a little more difficult. It'll take longer. Equally, there was a much more scrutiny, and again correctly, about safety, because there's more data available. The difference between 1950 and 2000 and the amount of data that was available, the amount of monitoring that one could do, and simply the media scrutiny and the communication that was around made regulatory agencies, again correctly, much more careful about approving products and much more conservative about approving products. So these two twin pressures of requiring more rigorous economic evidence of some sort, which was vague at that time, and much more clearer safety evidence, and a much more conservative approach to that, hit not only Medtronic, but the industry. And if you think about it that way, we go back to our mission and say, well, our job is to change outcomes. And if we need to develop a skill set through which we can now be leaders not only in clinical trials, but also in clinical economic evidence generation and understanding the economic impact of some of our products, or all of our products for that matter, and ensuring that we have systems through which we can be proactive about safety and quality and reliability, and really raise the bar on that, then that's what we have to do. And so that's the journey that we progressed on, and it's a little bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but I wanted to give everyone a perspective as to why economic value is so important, because that then leads to the core underpinning of value-based healthcare. So value-based healthcare means what it says, means that you look at the value of a product or a technology, the financial value, in addition to the clinical value. And when you go through economic value analyses, one finds, especially with devices, that the economic value of devices and the clinical value of devices is realized at a different point in time than when the cost is incurred. So the cost is incurred when the procedure is performed, the product is paid for, the work is done, the operating room charges are incurred. The value is realized once the patient goes home. And tying the two together in a way that is fluid, in a way that's transparent, in a way that's comprehensive, is really what value-based healthcare is all about. And so this means that learning how to measure cost over an extended period of time in an objective and fair fashion that depicts the true value of the technology that's being implanted or deployed. The core of that is really value-based healthcare. And once you do that, then you can go to a variety of stakeholders in a very, very sort of matter-of-fact way and demonstrate why something is of value. Okay.
So, question about the doing that part. Yeah. So, you know, I think everyone continues to wrestle with the definitions, and I think, you know, hearing you articulate that clearly is really critical, I think, for our audience. But in the doing that part, is this really happening in the United States? And if so, or if not, I mean, where do you see some successes in the practice of value-based healthcare, either here in the US pockets perhaps, or abroad?
I think, you know, this is not going to be a light switch that goes from one to the other. It's not going to be a flip, because it isn't that simple. I think the value of something, you always have to qualify it in terms of the time horizon that you're looking at. As someone who's creating the technology or creating a value, one obviously wants to look, or one wants to have the opportunity to look at as long a time horizon as possible, because the value of different technologies or therapies might take longer or less. And so the longer it is, the more complete you can be. However, there are benefits that you can get over a short period of time as well. And so if you look at it in that angle, the advent of DRGs in the US hospital system in itself was value-based healthcare, but limited to within the four walls of the hospital. So that's a very specific definition of value there, because the DRG process allowed procedures to be in some sense capitated, but it really drove the value of the entire procedure as opposed to the different components that created that procedure. Now, a simple extension of that, which is already being put in place, is a 30-day readmission penalty, and maybe 90 days. And then you move on towards, you know, ACOs or population health, which look at longer and longer time horizons. So a lot of these moves are in place, some more than others. And the issue here, the complexity in this, is that unless you really take it to the longest time horizon, there's an opportunity to kind of, I hate to use the word game the system, but kind of using, you know, strict rules can come in the way of common sense. In other words, yeah, within 30 days, there's been a readmission penalty, so I'll go back in 31 days. I mean, that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's completely genuine, because the requirements that are put in place for the readmission are just too stringent for people, so they say, I'll just wait a day longer. And so, you know, you cannot make rules completely perfect. So if you start to block them out like that, you will get opportunities for that sort of thing to happen. And I think the answer to that is first, you know, be careful about that, be fluid about that, be cognizant and pragmatic enough to change those rules. I don't think we have those in place. I think what we have are time horizons that people have acknowledged that you need to measure over a longer time horizon, and those measurements are in place. However, making it simple over that time horizon, and at the same time being adept at changing regulations depending on what we learn, is just too slow today. And so I think we're very early in this journey. However, I will say that there are enough programs out there and enough demonstration projects out there that which I think by and large, you know, will provide results. And even if they're not successful, if they're well-designed demonstration products, you'll understand why. I think at some point, I'd predict only, and you know, I've got nothing other than pure sort of sense or intuition around this, but I'd predict that within the next 5 years, you will see an inflection point where these things will gather more momentum, and the slope towards moving towards value-based healthcare will change much more dramatically. I mean, there are hospitals and providers and payers or payer providers who are driving it. There are others who are doing little pilots. There are others who are simply waiting. And at some point, the ones who are waiting will see that there's enough motion that they have to jump on this train. It's a tough, kind of decision to make sometimes. How long do you wait for such things?
Well, and the notion of value-based healthcare, it's holistic, looking at the system. So, for a company like Medtronic, do you think, what do you think the either distinct or unique opportunity or role is for medical technology, and Medtronic specifically, to play a role in defining value-based healthcare or making a big impact on value-based healthcare?
Well, I think, in what I just mentioned, let me clarify that this is not an option for a company like Medtronic. Just let me repeat what I said. I said that the cost of what we provide is incurred at a different time than when the value is realized. So the people making the decision on cost, who pay us for our products and other device manufacturers, and therefore we get our business from that. That entity has no access to the value of what we're providing them, no access to the data other than qualitative information, or in a roundabout way through a reimbursement method. So I go change the reimbursement, then they realize the value, but they're not directing it. So what would happen here is if nothing changes, we would essentially be unable to prove a value differentiation between our products and anybody else's products, or our new products and our old products. Because the differentiated value can only be realized at a time and place which is separate and different from the people who are making the purchasing decisions. And so if you think about that and fast forward it, for us to thrive and reinvest in medical technology, which in the end has value after the procedure, we have to be able to have this change happen. And because it is so important to us, and we in fact are the people who create, who are the experts, if you like, who create the initial clinical evidence together with our provider partners, we're in the best possible place to make the next translation as to where the economic value will be and drive the system, rather than wait for some magic to happen. Because, if you leave this to an entity who's not involved with the technology, you will get rules and procedures and regulations being put in place which reflect the technology of yesterday. And that will not be appropriate. You'll always be running behind. And so you have to have stakeholders in here who can see through technology what the future will look like, the upcoming technologies, and therefore build systems through which those future technologies can be rewarded in an objective fashion through value-based healthcare. That's why it's critical for us. It's an imperative that without which we cannot possibly continue to grow as a technology company.
So let's talk a little bit about that growth as a technology company. So healthcare is evolving in the United States. It's evolving around the world. Medtronic is evolving as well. Walk us through a little bit of the business model transformation that you're taking Medtronic through in order to be able to be a growth-oriented technology company in sort of this new and changing world order.
Yeah. Well, listen, first of all, we look at the world of healthcare. We've tried to kind of simplify our thought process around what's important. And then drive strategies to fulfill those needs. And when it comes down to it, the three concurrent, what we call universal healthcare needs, that's true for any stakeholder in healthcare, whether it's us or it's another device company, or whether it's a hospital system or a government or a payer. And those three needs, first is a continued desire for improving clinical outcomes. So despite everything that I said about it being more difficult and more evidence that's required and all of that, people in general and humanity in general still wants better outcomes. Every one of you here would prefer to have a longer lifespan, would like to get cured from illnesses more quickly than before, to have less pain in the treatment and all of that. Everyone here will want that. And if there's technologies available and clinical knowledge is progressing in a way that it can leverage those technologies, that is a desire that will never go away. And so there's no such thing in my mind called saturation of medical advancement. There just isn't, because the need is insatiable. And so that's one thing that one always has to realize in a healthcare world, that the need for further improvement is always, always, always going to be there. It'll never go away. Second is that as that happens concurrently, there's an increasing disparity in access between different different people, which is most obvious between different countries, where there are large segments of population who do not get standards of care that have been established for over decades in other countries. And it's true also within countries and within cities. And third is the point that I just made, that that really in principle, healthcare should be an economic driver. It should be something that says that, with healthcare, because you're improving the quality of life, because you're extending life, it should actually help the economy. Instead, the healthcare is viewed as a cost burden. And that's because cost and quality are not being matched appropriately, because value-based healthcare doesn't exist. So these are the three fundamental needs in healthcare, to address these three items, which are somewhat related, but also centers of gravity which are different. To do that, we've approached on three kind of strategies. First is to make sure that our core innovating competence remains, our connection with physicians and our ability to invent new products, and that's like the old business model, and that has to stay. So any new business model that I'll talk about in a minute is completely useless without us being market leaders in the core therapies that we're in. And for that, you need the physician collaboration, you need the clinical evidence generation, you need all of that, and that has to be a priority, and that has to stay. So that's the same old business model. Built on top of that is a business model that takes existing therapies and allows us to access global markets in a much more rapid fashion than before. And to do that, we create partnerships with providers, private providers around the world, because the issue with global access is one of concurrent investment in infrastructure awareness as well as physician training. And by concurrent, I mean that the same people, same population set where you're creating an awareness and creating a diagnostic chain has access to a hospital within the area that they live. And that hospital has trained doctors and a capability to implement the therapies that the diagnostic change will create. And so those partnerships can be done with local hospitals, and building new business models which help fund the infrastructure, which help provide the training in return for some kind of shared risk and shared revenue is a sort of business model that we're creating to drive access in one dimension. Another is to do the same thing with governments around the world who want access to their population for healthcare, and at the same time they want their economy enhanced. We're willing to put up manufacturing sites in different countries if there are ways to fast track the acceptance of certain established therapies, and therefore the markets within those countries get expanded, and those manufacturing sites get economically viable. In the way of value-based healthcare, which in many ways is the most interesting business model change, we're actually looking at just moving our business to one where we take responsibility on the cost of managing a patient over a certain time window. And we've done this in two instances. One is in Europe primarily, although it's been expanded around the world, where we manage cath labs. And we get paid based on a per-patient fee. And so we have a fixed cost, and that's what the hospital pays us. If it costs us more than that per patient, we take the penalty. If it costs us less, then we get the benefit, and usually we would share that with the hospital. So that's a business model where we share the risk with the hospital because of the care that's provided within the hospital. In other business models, ones that we have in the US, we would take risk with certain providers. The VA is one such institution where we would look at patients in the home. and look at the overall cost of chronic disease management in certain areas where we've got capabilities in, like cardiology or heart failure, and say again that we will charge a per patient fee. And again, we will go to the difference. So going to a much more risk-based model is a big business model change. The only other thing that I will say there is that we will not be an insurance company in terms of risk-based models. We will go after areas where we know the answer. That means we've done the clinical trials. We realize that by doing things a certain way, you will get the results. And the point is, to achieve those results, not only do we need certain technologies, you need certain management systems, patient management systems. And only by deploying that expertise do we have confidence that the risk-based business model is one that is economically viable for us.
So as you look, I mean, I think everybody's a little intrigued at the commitment to holistically the patient, the end-to-end management. That's a completely different business model for a company like Medtronic or any of your peers. Can you talk just a little bit more? I mean, you sort of mentioned having different management systems. I mean, what's some of the transformation required to go from...
For us, you mean?
Yeah, for Medtronic, and being able to take that on, and do you view that as a great opportunity for Medtronic?
Well, absolutely. We do, not only as an opportunity, but if I go back to the outcomes, our mission, using technology to change outcomes. Previously, if you provided the technology and provided clinical evidence, the outcome change happened automatically. Right now, to do the outcomes change, you need to go over a longer time horizon. It's just as simple as that. And so therefore, to live our mission, we've got to have technologies and capabilities over a longer time horizon than before. So that's the motivation for that. So I think that's important to state, because the organization needs to understand that we're not in here trying to become a generic consulting service or some kind of even an insurance company or something like that. It's none of that. It basically is, how do we make sure that the technologies that we're inventing actually change outcomes? And so internal communication of that is a very important element in this change management process. What skills do we need to build up? Well, the two separate skills which are very important, the translation of clinical evidence to economic evidence, which requires healthcare economics expertise. And second, the translation of that macroeconomic evidence into micro or very specific economic evidence for this very specific stakeholder you're talking about. So in other words, what that means is that if through a clinical trial you get clinical evidence which says that somebody will go to the hospital, the hospital readmission rates will go down. And we then formulate overall for a patient population, that means that the cost will come down by so much. What does that mean to a very specific hospital? Does that mean to that hospital that they're actually economically better off? They may or may not be, because if the patient comes back to the hospital fewer times, maybe they're worse off economically. Not the right thing to do from a healthcare perspective, but the economic measurement may be such that the hospital is worse off. So understand, and therefore you need to go to the payer to complete that equation. So understanding the details of the translation of the macroeconomic model into a very specific economic model to the stakeholders is a skill set that we are developing, and I'd say that are well on the way to becoming nowhere near mature, but fairly capable at. And you've got to do that in a pre-market basis, you've got to do that on a post-market basis. So that's a very important skill set. The other skill set is then to understand how these contracts are developed, to understand what the stakeholders want, what the hospital systems want, how their financial systems work, and how to translate the value proposition that we're talking about into their financial system so that they can understand it. And that's not as easy as it sounds. And it certainly changes by country, and it changes by hospital. So those are the types of skill sets that we've had to start to create within the company that we didn't have before.
Sure. So we'll shift around a little. You spent 16 years at GE before coming to Medtronic, and I'm curious what about that GE time really kind of uniquely prepared you to take over Medtronic? And what were some of the things, I think that you liked about GE that you're looking to implement at Medtronic, or some of the things specifically you learned not to do at GE as you apply, your signature to Medtronic?
Well, first of all, look, 16 years is a long time. It was a formative time for me as a manager and as a business leader, and certainly, there are a lot of things I learned. It's a place where you can gain. It's like 16 years of business school, if you like. Have different case studies and so on, which are real life examples of how to conduct business in a variety of different situations. And what's more is that you get good input and advice and support from others who've also got experience in doing that. So it's a great place to learn business globally, to learn different aspects of how to execute, primarily execute in business, to develop strategies, how to create a certain level of rhythm to business. And it's not that other companies don't have it, and it's not that Medtronic didn't have it, but it did give me at GE a certain level of breadth in understanding that, just because of the breadth of the company. Now, but what it also did, which is more unique to my personal situation, is the fact that I was brought into GE in 1995 or whenever to actually start up and take GE to the #1 position in the ultrasound imaging business. And the reason I was brought in to do that was because in the years prior to that, I developed an expertise in that industry. And so what I learned how to do is to link customer connection, physician knowledge, and focus on a specific medical industry, and how to leverage the assets of a big corporation to point it to create a competitive advantage. And that was a big learning for me. And from that, I learned what to do and what not to do. The importance of customer intimacy, the importance of understanding and having relationships with physicians. And what do you take from a big company when you want to emphasize that, and what do you not take? And the thing that brought me to Medtronic was the one thing that GE did not have, which was a singular mission and a singular focus around patients and healthcare. And so all the things that I learned at GE about how to use a big company, use a lot of assets. Now, Medtronic isn't as big as GE, but it's big. There's a lot of assets, enough. If you harness them properly, you can make a difference to very specific customers. I've learned over the years that healthcare is a granular business. Healthcare is not a homogeneous business. Every patient is different. Every therapy is different. Every condition is different. And judgment just cannot be ignored. But at the same time, that cannot be an excuse for no systems at all. And so this balance between generic process rigor, generic usage of overall structure, but at the same time recognizing the invention, the intuition that's required to provide good healthcare, and how it's different from doctor to doctor, and from practice to practice, and from specialty to specialty. I think that's a very important understanding, which in a company like Medtronic, like I said before, you try to do these broad things like business model changes, but you can never forget your roots, that you've got to be innovative with a specific physician. I often tell the employees at Medtronic is that the way I'd like Medtronic to be viewed is that every single physician who interacts with us, every single type of physician, say a cardiologist, or a neurologist, or a neurosurgeon, or a endocrinologist. Every single one of them must feel that all Medtronic does is what they do. That's the way we've got to structure the company. And that's the way we've got to have dedication and expertise in terms of technology, as well as commercial expertise dedicated for that type of customer, clinical expertise. And then what we do is we share back offices and other things where scale can really matter, or business model, or exchange ideas between each other. But this mix of small company and big company, which is a very difficult equation to fulfill, and I do not claim that I have anywhere close to the perfect answers there, because there's trade-offs you have to make every day on that, and you can be right or wrong. But that combination is an enormous value creator in business, if you can do that. And that's the kind of thing that I've picked up from GE.
Well, and so as you think about the granularity of delivering Medtronic's value, I know you were in India last week. I mean, they're huge emerging markets with patient populations, lots of different challenges. You know, people talk often about India and China, but dramatically different challenges. You know, to get to that level, what kind of strategies, how do you even prioritize as a company where to go in terms of geography, which patient populations to really target for growth and service when they vary so greatly around the world?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because I'll tell you what the answer is not. The answer is not simply do some kind of a business model with an NPV and whichever is the best, you know, just pick that. Because the problem with those things is that it all depends on your assumptions. And you'll make assumptions based on what you're comfortable with. You know, we would be, and just as an example of that, is that we would be willing to take a risk on some new technology or therapy which doesn't have any revenue and requires maybe hundreds of millions of dollars of investments, and we'd be prepared to take a risk in it because we're comfortable doing that. We've got expertise doing that. And yet, to try to create a dedicated distribution channel in China, which may cost like $10 million or $50 million, we may be too worried, because, you know, you don't know what IP is going to get lost, you don't know what the government's going to do. It's just something we're not comfortable with. So that's why NPV all depends on what you're comfortable with. So you cannot simply use that. I mean, that has to be used, but with the right perspective around it. So what else do you put in? You go back to your fundamental needs, your universal needs of healthcare, and you look at those and you try to balance the three. And you say, well, you know, we've got to grow. So what portion can we realistically expect that we can get out of innovation in today's world? And say, well, we need to grow at this amount. So what portion do we need out of access? And so we need a different kind of global access. You need a different kind of investment to create global access. So within that, you invest separately from therapy innovation. And then if you want to do access, then you say, well, there's 120 countries. Which one do I go to first? And so again, you start to, you know, India. India is a great example. Our business in India is a tenth of what, 15% of what it is in China. It has the same population. So one argument would be, why do you want to even bother with it? Focus on all the other countries. Another argument will be, hey, look, it's 1 billion people there, 1 billion people in China. In one place, healthcare is 15% of the other. Surely there's a big opportunity. So it depends on which way we want to think about it. So I think, and then the same thing with value-based healthcare. You can think about how difficult it is, and we don't know how to do this, and we don't know how to take risk. The other side of the coin says that, look, I know that this value proposition has financial merit, but it's not being tapped. So if I know how to tap it, I can create a business model that makes money. So I think getting some fundamental truths around some structured thinking around what the needs really are, and then sort of prioritizing or saying, how much can I get from each? Starting from one that you know the most to the one that you know the least, but expect some from everywhere. And that's the way in which you have to do this prioritization exercise. And then you depend on people in different business units to go through that same exercise in their own area.
Love to talk about Covidien. How about you?
Sure. I'd love to as well. Yeah.
Earlier today, we did our Alley Awards, and of course, our story of the year, which I'll let you take with you, is Medtronic to acquire Covidien. You know, you've been pretty transparent in outlining your strategies for Medtronic, including today. You know, as you've walked us through. And I think people here are really interested in just, you know, take us through a little bit of the rationale. You know, why Covidien? What's the opportunity for the Medtronic Covidien package? You know, why do the deal?
Yeah, you know, let me just tell you the story of which is in detail in the S4. So, you know, if you bother to read all 100 pages or whatever. You'll kind of, it's all there. But in summary, let me just tell you the kind of historical, chronology. First, a deal like this actually happens very quickly, because in a public company of this size, once you start talking, you got to get it done real quick, because if it gets out, you get forced to do things which you don't want to do, announced prematurely and so on, so you don't want to do that. So you need to happen very quickly, and you can only do it with a few people. And so it's a very kind of quick process where you have to think very clearly about what's important, why do you want to do this, and what will you get out of it. So the process actually took about 3 months. From my first conversation with Joe Almeida, who's the CEO of Covidien, till we announced the deal in June. And I can tell you that something like 85% of the time, the first 85% in chronological order of that time, was all spent around strategy and whether we want to do it or not. And it was very simple, the process. It starts with the first question I had, and it was a non-negotiable for us, are two things only. One is, does Covidien help us accelerate the mission of Medtronic? And two, it's called Medtronic. Everything else, comes next. But those two were pretty paramount, and Joe agreed. He felt that those were all good, because he liked the mission of Medtronic, and he felt that Medtronic would be, with its brand name, would give Covidien the kind of value, the Covidien entities, the value that it required. So those agreements we made right up front. And if we hadn't agreed on those, we wouldn't have spent 3 months. We would have spent like 2 days. Okay? And then after the mission, and Joe and I agreed right up front on this. After the mission, we spent time in deciding, does it fit strategically? Well, what does it mean by does it fit strategically to us? What it meant to us is that I'd already outlined our strategy, our growth strategy. Therapy innovation, expansion of access, and value-based healthcare, which I just described to you, and which we talked about for the last 3 or 4 years. Does Covidien help us accelerate each of those strategies or not? So we went through that in detail. And we came to the conclusion, and if you have time, I can even walk you through why each one of those strategies gets accelerated because of Covidien. Then we decided, well, good, so we can get more growth, it fits into our mission, can we afford it? Do we get enough synergies out of this thing that, this is obviously not free, it's going to cost a lot of money, and can we afford to kind of pay it back and have good financial, operational financial performance as a result of that? So then we did that. When we'd done all of that, and we satisfied ourselves that, yes, this was a good deal, then we decided to ask ourselves the question, how do we best structure the company? And that's when the inversion story came along, because Covidien is already an Irish company, and inverting the company only made sense because if you didn't, you'd destroy the value of Covidien. That's basically what would happen. Just to be clear to everybody, what we get from the inversion is we get access to the cash that's being generated by the legacy Covidien entities. Not our existing, not the cash that Medtronic has already generated, nor the cash that the legacy Medtronic entities will generate even after the transaction. So as far as we were concerned, we were not really changing what Covidien was doing by doing the inversion. We simply weren't making it worse, which would destroy the value in that company. And obviously, we couldn't do a deal under those circumstances. So that was the thought process. Mission, strategy that's aligned with our strategies that we've already talked about, and then quantify that those strategies result in a business model that makes sense over time, and then the structure. And when you put all that together, we were excited when we announced it, and as we've been through in the last, 3 or 4 months here, in putting together integration teams and identifying opportunities, we are very excited about what we're seeing.
So of course, plenty written about the deal, and when it was first announced, tax inversion, lots of different issues. As you were putting the deal together, what were your expectations for the way both the investor and just the press at large would respond to this. And were you prepared for the blowback in many cases that transpired shortly after, in particular in Minnesota?
Well, to some degree, okay, because we knew that this was going to be controversial to some degree. But we felt that we would just tell them the story like the story I just told you, which is the truth, which is here are the benefits. This is why. This is specifically why we get strategic benefits. This is what we get out of the inversion. This is what we don't get out of the inversion. And by the way, this is why it's good for the US, which is the reinvestment back in the US into medtech, as well as the creation of jobs in Minnesota. So we thought of that up front because we knew that there would be some issues, but we felt that being transparent about it and explaining that in the same consistent fashion to all the different stakeholders would be the best thing that we could do, because we believed in it and we thought it was good, and we thought it was good for the US. And so we just kind of told that story. And that's the preparation that we had. So we prepared ourselves to demonstrate, and therefore we made the commitment that we will reinvest this money back in the US, which, you know, we just publicized the commitment. We'd have done it because that's the right thing to do, and that's the best thing for us and for the industry. And the jobs in Minnesota come without question because, you know, we will in fact have more focus here in many ways. And so we thought that it's best if we kind of make that clear. Now, what we weren't prepared for was you know, there was a whole variety of different deals that happened following ours. And, you know, they all had their own kind of circumstances, and all of them weren't like ours. And then that got caught into a world of its own. But at the end of the day, we, you know, in some ways kind of saw it happen, but we stuck to our strategy and our story, which we felt in the end and its fundamentals was right. And we still feel that. And that's as simple as that. And kind of, you know, so read the articles, but what can you do about it? I mean, we just, and then when the Treasury changed the rules, we looked at it and we, you know, reacted accordingly. And because the deal was based on strategy, we could manage to restructure it in the way we did.
And the commitment of 1,000 jobs in Minnesota, the $10 billion investment in the United States, I know, you know, through our conversations, I mean, that is very strategic for Medtronic too. And I think, you know, it's easy for reporters, the press often, you know, how are you going to honor those commitments? But give us just a little more detail on the strategic nature of why you're comfortable making those commitments about $10 billion investment in the U.S. and those jobs in Minnesota.
Because look, because it's something that we've been doing. It's not something that we've never done before. We have had a history of investing in early stage companies whose technologies we've made standard of care. We've done that with Minimed in diabetes. We've done that with AVE in peripheral vascular. We've done that with sophomore Danik in spine. You just go everywhere. You can see all kinds of evidence where we bought companies in the early stages. We've invested in those companies by enhancing their technology and making those technologies more robust for the market, and then creating markets around it by developing clinical evidence, getting reimbursement, training physicians, and eventually creating markets which other companies have participated in. The most recent example, well, not quite the most recent, but one that was about 18 months ago, you know, we bought Cardiocom, which was a home health, cardiac home health management company. Since we bought them, they had 100 employees in this area in Minnesota. In the 1 year, they've gone up to 240 employees. So in 18 months, we basically more than doubled their employee base. Not because we just wanted to hire people, because because that company's grown. And we're making that standard of care. And as we make it standard of care, it deserves the extra investment. So through this, we've created thousands of jobs in the US. And again, not for charity, but because that's been the right thing to do for our business and for the industry and for patients. And so this is not a foreign concept to us, to invest in early stage technologies and create markets. Now, what was limiting us is that our cash, more than 50% of our cash was being generated outside the US. And if we brought it back, the penalty that we'd pay in taxes would be so high that our ability to make those investments were constrained. It's not that we didn't have any ability, but it was constrained. By doing this, that constraint simply is reduced. Doesn't go away completely because we don't have access to all our cash, but it's significantly reduced. And because it's reduced, we can make these investments in a more flexible fashion than we did before. And that's where the $10 billion over 10 years comes from. So it's pretty much, things that we know how to do, and we simply accelerate it because we have more cash, and we think that is the right thing to do for growth. And the 1,000 jobs in Minnesota, well, look, first of all, there's a lot of med tech activity in Minnesota. So there's going to be some benefit out of that. But outside of that, the main headquarters in the United States for Covidien is in Boston. We have ours here. There's only going to be one CEO. There's only going to be one CFO. There's going to be only one, other types of administrative functions, and you can extrapolate that. So clearly, it's going to be a bigger focus here.
You spend a lot of time traveling around the world, and so you get access to ministers of health, leaders around the world that most people don't get access to. As you connect with leaders in other countries, what are some of the recurring themes that you're seeing in other countries that make you pause and think about Medtronic's future?
That's an interesting question. First, there are differences based on the environment that they're in. But I found if I was to pull one common thread across all countries, whether it's be developed or emerging or different in all kinds of different ways, but one common thread is that there appears to be this almost this fascination or this feeling that prevention of disease is the answer to all problems. Well, of course it is, except you won't prevent disease in somebody who's already got the disease. And unfortunately, if you want to move the needle in healthcare in terms of both extension of life and cost, you've got to address people with the disease. And that connection, that prevention of escalation of disease, is as important, or perhaps even more important at this stage than the prevention of onset of disease, or at least equally important. I think that simple concept is actually lost on most sort of governments, because they think, well, okay, don't take sugar and don't eat fat and all that stuff, and healthcare problems will be solved. Well, people have already done that for 30 years. It's not going to be solved with them, and they tend to live longer, and they'll be very expensive. And so the prevention of escalation of disease is a concept that's in the middle of what we do. That's what chronic disease management is all about. And I think there's a limited understanding of how to approach that, of why that's important. And depending in developed countries, there's a little more advanced thinking around that. But in emerging markets, there really isn't. The problem is so big, they don't know where to go. So that's the communicating the importance of chronic disease management and the prevention of escalation of disease and the cost savings that's entailed in that if done properly, and therefore the human benefit that provides. A real cause and effect linkage is missing, and not easy to do, but one that we're striving to provide in certain diseases. And I think that makes a big difference in our credibility in the discussions with different stakeholders.
And as you travel around, who impresses you? Who are some of the thought leaders, some of the folks around the world, either in business or leading health ministries, that you look to for inspiration, that you're impressed by?
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot of good thinking. I don't know if I can take any names just off the cuff, but certainly, organizations such as NICE in the UK, very established, highly reputed. There are other countries, I'd say, Japan, for example, one finds, it's got its own nuances, but a really very focused effort on really using technology to improve healthcare and a real commitment. towards improving healthcare of an aging population there. China, very, very focused and determined effort, and in terms of execution, from a government perspective, China's pretty good, very good. And so, there's a variety of different things to learn from the different healthcare systems, and their leaders kind of exemplify that in many ways. Some smaller countries, which I've been, quite impressed by. A country as small as Kazakhstan in Eastern Europe or in Central Asia, rather, where in their mission of their country, so they have a mission statement of their country as to what they want to do. Improving the health is like number 2 or 3, and their government reacts accordingly. So when you see these things and you see some of the ministers of health and some of the leaders, the amount of time that they have put into this, and the amount of passion that they have in changing the lives of ordinary people, that's an inspiration. I think the one that I will mention, someone who comes from Bangladesh, actually, the Professor Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Prize for microfinance. I found him as a pretty impressive personality, who has obviously done what he's done for microcredit, but he has always impressed me as an individual who's willing to try things. Just try it. Take ideas and try them. And a very determined and passionate, and in the end, an effective kind of focus on helping the underserved, not by charity, but to help people rise out of poverty into wealth. And in our situation, we rise out of bad health into good health in a sustainable fashion. And so he's certainly been an inspiration. There are others in business who I've watched over time, created incredible businesses. You cannot not be impressed with Jack Welch, who in his own way taught me a lot of stuff, and then Jeff Immelt himself. I worked at GE, and a lot of what I've learned, how to manage, has come out of those individuals. So, there are several who I've learned from over the years.
So as the leader of Medtronic, the world follows almost everything you say. Very savvy, a lot of communication, whether it's in 140 characters yeah. or otherwise. So how many people do you have tweeting for you?
What do you think? Do you see any 2 coming out at one time?
I think in our small organization, people walk around saying, why can you not tweet as often as Omar? And I think
tweeting isn't that difficult. It does take a few seconds. I'll tell you how we do this. First of all, almost 100% of those are things that I've kind of thought of. Okay, but look, I cannot be in the position that I'm in and be completely cavalier about this. You just cannot afford to, and I cannot afford to make mistakes. So I do get them kind of double-checked before I send them out. But it happens very quickly. But not double-checked in terms of the language, but double-checked in terms of any legal issues that may be there, that I may not think of. So that has to happen. But beyond that, but that's a very quick process. But beyond that, those are my tweets, and usually I craft even down to 140 characters. I can ask a few people if I have trouble with it. I ask a few people, help me with this, and they help me. Just like anybody else would. I also take suggestions. Often people suggest, why don't you tweet about this or that, and yeah, I do that. So it really is something, frankly, I enjoy. I find, and I tell you, I look at it a lot. I look at it because of a couple of reasons. First, I find it as a pretty effective news gathering, quick news gathering method. You know what's going on in the world very, very quickly through that, quicker than any other item. You hear what people are thinking about other things in a very quick fashion without having to read long articles. And you get a good, or you know what to read later. Equally importantly, you see how people are thinking about what you say. So, what are people saying about things that I tweet out? And you get this kind of subjective, qualitative feel for some of the strategies that we've talked about. And I can tell you it's also a window where people have reached out to me for specific problems, and we've taken action about Medtronic. And then I've tried my best to take, I can't do it always, but I try my best to take action. So employees also kind of look at that, I think, because I've had responses from that. So I really enjoy Twitter a lot. I think it's a very effective way of staying in touch. And like I said, it's fun.
I think it allows if people get a much better chance to get to know you as a person. And so, as we kind of wind down, I do think that that's another area people are interested in learning about. So, I could ask you a bunch of questions about your family and what you're reading, and you can answer all those, of course. But, if you weren't doing this, if you were not in the med tech field, if you were not CEO of a Fortune 500 company, what would you be doing?
Well, I don't know. What are some of the things what I probably would have been doing in my career? I probably would have been doing, engineering. I'd have been in some research lab doing engineering. I still enjoy that. I mean, I don't do it a lot, but I enjoy learning about it, trying to understand how things work. I'm curious. And I could spend my time still in a research lab doing a technical project on an area that would interest me, and teaching those things as you get better at that. And that's not just in healthcare, probably, although, again, depends on, how long ago you want to draw the line here. But, obviously I've developed an expertise and an interest in healthcare, which doesn't go away. But, there are other technical areas which would also interest me. But it's primarily healthcare and technology and, electronics and material science and so on. So that's probably what I'd be doing.
And what, it's family vacation time. What do you and your family like to do to get away from being a Fortune 500 CEO?
Well, I like to, for me, as most of you may appreciate, work is there all the time, and you can't just disappear. And you got to work at all kinds of hours. What I try to do is block out dedicated time with my family, where, I'm still available, but it is dedicated time with my family somewhere else. We enjoy the ocean a lot, so I go to California a lot, to the ocean there, and outside of that, we like hiking in the mountains somewhere. We do that. We go to Austria quite a bit. This winter, we'll go to India and hopefully Bangladesh for a little while, and maybe Singapore or Southeast Asia somewhere. We haven't quite settled yet, but I'd do that for a week or something. I find that travel, of course, is different from business travel. I get to actually see the place. And again, with your family, you really are a slightly different person, and so that's the kind of thing I do.
We really appreciate you coming, sharing your insights into both the global healthcare perspective, but also just again sitting down and letting your hometown get to know you a little bit better. I'll give you the last word if there's anything else that you'd like to throw out to our audience today.
Well, listen, maybe on a light note, I've actually learned to enjoy the Minnesota winters. I really have. I think the snow is, I don't want to get too cold, but it's pretty, and I've learned how to embrace these winters, and I really enjoy the fact that people go out there and enjoy it. I mean, people don't hide They go out there and embrace the winter, and I really learned to enjoy that. And although I said I like the beach, and every so often I do take a break, but this has been, I just want to thank the Minneapolis community at large for welcoming me to this city overall, and just the overall reception that I've had here, not only from Medtronic, but from the community at large. And I really enjoy it here. I think it's a great city with great people, with things to do that I really enjoy. And perhaps most important of all, it is the hub of medtech in the US and perhaps in the world. And where else would I be? So thank you again. Thank you for everything you guys have done. The Life Science Alley, congratulations on the 30th anniversary here. And, again, thank you for inviting me. And it's a delight to be here and talk to all of you. Thank you all very much.
Omar Ishrak. Thank you. And, we'll give you the Story of the Year award with everything else. You bet. Thank you. Thank you so much, Omar. Well, I see Ryan running up, which means there's some element of housekeeping that I'm going to fail. No, good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you enjoyed today as much as we enjoyed putting today on. Again, Omar, thank you so much. Suzanne, all of our speakers. I think Mark has disappeared at this point, and I know Jeff Bolton has as well. But please give us your feedback. Again, our objective today was to give you access to leaders, an opportunity to connect with future business partners, and again, hopefully to get a better handle on our continued changing healthcare environment. And throughout 2015, Life Science Alley will continue to try and do that work for you. So again, truly an honor to have had you today. The bar is open. Please enjoy yourself, and thank you for your attendance today.